All right, so are you ready to dive deep into a case that is absolutely wild?
Oh, yeah.
It's the murders of Pamela and Helen Hargan. And the really crazy part is that the killer was their own daughter and sister Megan.
Wow.
Yeah, it's intense. And we're going to go beyond
Yeah.
the headlines here.
Yeah.
We're not just going to rehash the crime itself.
Right.
We're going to look in what happened after the conviction.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and we're going to do that thanks to Detective Byerson's interviews in episode 6 of the Blood is Thicker podcast.
Oh, cool. So we get like an insider perspective.
Exactly. And one of the biggest things that happened after was that a juror decided to play detective.
Oh, no.
I know, right?
What do you mean?
Well, she tried to recreate a scenario the defense presented during the trial.
What, like a reenactment?
Yeah, basically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it gets even crazier because the scenario involved Helen shooting herself with a rifle using her toe.
Wait, you mean like she...
She had tried to see if it was physically possible.
Oh, my gosh.
I know, right? It's wild.
So what happened then? Did the judge find out?
Oh, yeah, he definitely found out.
Right.
And, the jury reached a guilty verdict.
Right.
But this juror's actions basically threw everything into question.
How so?
Well, it introduced the possibility of bias, which is, a really big deal in court.
Oh, yeah, of course. That makes sense.
So put yourself in the shoes of Ashley, the surviving daughter. I mean, she's endured this horrific loss.
Yeah.
She sat through an entire trial
Right.
and finally got a guilty verdict, and then boom, it's all thrown out because of this one juror.
I can't even imagine.
It's crazy, right? And Ashley had to go through another trial.
Oh, wow. She's strong for doing that.
Totally. But, the prosecution knew they had to change things up this time around.
Oh, really? Like, how?
Well, one of the biggest changes was that they decided not to call Ashley to the stand.
What? But I thought her testimony was super important in the first trial.
It was. But they had a few reasons for this decision.
What were they?
Well, first of all, they wanted to protect Ashley from even more trauma,
Oh, that makes sense.
especially after, that intense cross-examination she went through before.
Right, right.
And secondly, they thought they could build a strong enough case without her.
So kind of catch the defense off guard.
Exactly. It was a risk, but it ended up working out for them.
Interesting. So if Ashley wasn't testifying, then who was?
Well, Helen's boyfriend, Carlos Gutierrez,
Yeah.
he stepped up, and his testimony was incredibly powerful.
Oh, wow.
And not just because of the facts he presented, but because of the emotion he brought,
Wow.
He was actually the last person to talk to Helen before she was murdered.
That's heartbreaking. I can't imagine having to carry that weight.
Yeah, to be the last voice your loved one hears before their life is taken like that.
That must have been so hard for him to testify.
Oh, definitely. Detective Byerson talked about how much respect he had for Carlos for being willing to do that, even though it obviously brought back all those painful memories.
Yeah.
And, that kind of authentic, heartfelt testimony,
Hmm.
it can really resonate with a jury.
For sure. It makes it so much more real.
Yeah, you're not dealing with facts anymore. You're seeing the real human cost of this horrific crime. Yeah, it really makes you think about the people who are left behind after something like this.
It does. And, Carlos's testimony, along with all the other evidence, led to another guilty verdict for Megan.
That's good. At least there was some justice.
This time, no rogue jurors, just straight up justice. But, as you dig deeper into this case, you start to realize that the story doesn't end there.
Yeah, that's what I find so interesting. We're going beyond just the trial and conviction and looking into, the messy aftermath,
Yeah.
like what happened to everyone involved.
Exactly. And one of those loose ends is Megan's husband, Frank.
Yeah, Frank claimed to be totally in the dark about Megan using her mother's stolen money for that house in West Virginia.
Right.
But does that really add up?
I mean, imagine being that realtor, in the office with Frank, looking at a bank statement for a house with hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Money. His wife supposedly just got out of thin air and he doesn't even react.
Right, like how could he not have known something was wrong?
Exactly. Detective Byerson said that Frank did answer a few questions early on in the investigation,
Okay.
but then he just vanished.
Oh, wow.
Never testified at either trial and refused to talk to investigators.
So that's a huge red flag. Like, why wouldn't he cooperate if he was innocent?
Right.
Did the police ever try to charge him with anything?
Well, they questioned him, but ultimately decided not to press charges.
Why not?
Detective Byerson said they didn't have enough evidence to tie Frank directly to the financial crimes,
Okay.
let alone the murders.
So legally they couldn't do anything,
Right.
but morally it just feels like something's not right.
Yeah, like Frank might be getting away with something.
Totally. And then there's Molly Megan's daughter.
Right, she was just a kid when all this happened.
What happened to her after Megan was arrested?
Well, after Megan was taken into custody, Molly went to live with her father, Frank.
Huh.
And that he had been pretty absent from her life up to that point.
Oh, wow.
And then Frank made the decision to completely cut off all contact between Molly and the rest of the Hargan family.
Wait, so Ashley and her father, Steve, couldn't even see Molly?
No, they were completely shut out.
Wow.
They tried to fight for visitation rights, but they were denied.
Oh my gosh, so they lost even more.
Yeah, it's just another layer of pain and loss.
Like a second betrayal.
Yeah.
First, their own family member commits these awful acts, and then the person who's supposed to be protecting Molly cuts them off completely.
It's a complicated situation for sure.
Yeah, and it makes you question Frank's role in all of this.
Right, like was he trying to protect Molly or was he trying to protect himself?
Exactly.
It makes you think about the ripple effects of these kinds of crimes.
Yeah.
The damage goes way beyond just the immediate victims.
For sure, Ashley lost her mother and sister,
Right.
but she also lost her niece and basically another sister in the process.
It speaks to the lasting trauma of family violence.
Yeah.
You know, that sense of safety and trust is shattered, and it's so difficult to rebuild those bonds.
And for Molly, it's hard to imagine what she must be going through.
It's true, she lost so much at such a young age, and now she's being kept from the people who love her most.
It's just awful.
It shows how important it is to support children who go through this kind of trauma.
Yeah.
They're often overlooked, but the impact on their lives can be huge.
It's definitely something we need to pay more attention to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so sad to think about Molly, this innocent child who lost her grandmother and aunt,
All right.
and now she's separated from the rest of her family who love her.
It really makes you think about how messed up families can be.
It does. The fact that someone could do something so horrible to their own family, it's just mind-boggling.
I know, and for what? For money.
Yeah, it just seems so pointless.
Greed is a powerful thing.
It really is.
Yeah.
Detective Byerson seemed pretty sure that Megan was just completely selfish.
Yeah.
He even said she was a sociopath.
Wow.
Someone who doesn't feel empathy or remorse.
Right.
And he didn't think she'd ever admit to what she did.
Even after being found guilty twice.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense if she's really a sociopath.
It wouldn't be surprising people like that they just don't see things the same way.
Right, so where does that leave everyone?
Hmm.
Megan's in prison, but her daughter's isolated.
Mm.
Her sister and father are trying to pick up the pieces.
Right.
And Frank, well, he's disappeared with a lot of unanswered questions.
It shows how justice doesn't always equal closure.
Yeah.
There's still so much pain and it affects so many people.
This whole case has really stuck with me.
Yeah.
All the twists and turns, the betrayals, the things we still don't know.
It's a lot.
It makes you wonder how well you can ever really know anyone, even your own family.
That's a tough question to think about.
It is. And if you're as fascinated by this case as I am, I highly recommend listening to episode 6 of the Blood is Thicker podcast.
Oh, yeah. Detective Byerson's perspective is really valuable.
It is. He was there for the whole thing, and it adds so much to the story.
And as you're thinking about all of this, maybe consider what this case says about people in general.
Yeah.
Like, what does it tell us about the dark side of human nature?
That's a deep question.
It is. And how can we protect people and make sure justice is served?
It's a lot to think about, but those are the kinds of questions that stay with you.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into a true crime case that is still unfolding in a way, even though it's officially closed.
It's been a really interesting discussion.
It has. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating true crime story.